Let's update our application in this lesson and make it a little bit more dynamic. So we need an input, just regular text input. And I've already used search within the ID. Do search term and value. For the value right now, maybe it can be something like JavaScript. That's a very relevant term to be searching within a JavaScript course. So let's refresh, and we've got JavaScript. And what we want to do is be able to click the search button and search Wikipedia. So the reason Wikipedia is pretty cool is because it's got a lot of information and it's got a really flexible API. So there's some information on it, of course, about the API. So they've got the basic endpoint, so action query, titles, main, page. There's some information here that you don't necessarily need. Format, JSON, format version 2. There's a bunch of information here, and basically this can return back some content within a JSON format. And of course, you could click that and you could see that this is information that we're returning back. So we're going to use a more stripped down version of the URI. So we've got our API PHP, format JSON, action open search, and our search term, so JavaScript there. And this is also really important. So that origin equals asterisk is super important. And let me show you why. So let's open up our application that we were building out. Go over here. We're going to replace this placeholder random user with that. And this time, let me remove out that origin. So refresh, search, and we get this course error. So you're going to encounter this. This happens very often that you get this no control allow origin. This is a course error. And this error is triggered if you're trying to connect to an API across different domains. And it's very common. You're going to see this a lot of times if you're unfamiliar with API, or if it's not an API that you've set up, that you're trying to just connect to these URLs. And Wikipedia has a really nice solution for it because it can pass in some of that header information using origin asterisk. So that's why I said it's really super important to make sure that you include that, because now when I refresh it, we actually get some information back. So we've got JavaScript engine. So we've got 3 different values here that are being returned back. And so it's got a number of different search terms here in the first array. It's got our search value there in that array, and it's not actually getting this value yet from the input, and we are going to hook that up. Next, it's giving us some information about the API. So this is all being returned back within an array format, but it's also within a string format. So we can pull back this information and simply output it on our web page. And we can go through this array if we want, or we can just use the first item in the array that's being returned back. So let's try this out. And this actually could vary depending on what our search term is. So we got to be really careful about making it too static. We want the more dynamic we can make our application, the better off we're going to be. Let's start by grabbing our search term. And the search term here can be added in within the URL. So let's add that. So we need to grab that information first. So let's do search term. We'll use query selector. Query selector is sometimes one of my favorite ones to use. There's always different ways. You could have given it an ID and grabbed it by document get element by ID. So that's one of the most standard ways to do this. This time we're going to grab the input, and we're grabbing input with the name, and this way we can make our selection, and this one has a name of search term. And one of the things to keep in mind when you are using IDs, by default the browser will take these in as objects, so you don't actually have to do get element by ID search, you could just do search. So some browsers will do that, and that's why I don't always prefer using IDs. And especially I'm setting variables for the objects because this is already done by default in some of the browsers. So just keep that in mind. That's why doing it this way with the query selectors is a little bit better, but it's up to you. So now whenever we click it, and actually we don't have anything that's doing anything with that value that we took in. So let's update that to be search term. So we'll just copy that out. get rid of JavaScript. And of course, we already have a default value of JavaScript. So nothing should change, but it's just how we're getting that data. So we're going to click search. We're searching for JavaScript. And it looks like something went wrong there. So let's quickly output our search term in the console. So what do you think happened here? What do you think went wrong? And we see that we're not grabbing the value. So whenever you're using inputs, you got to make sure that you grab the value. So we're just grabbing that whole element as an object, but we want to make sure we're grabbing the value. So next we click it. We've got our JavaScript. We're sending it over to the server, and we're outputting the data that we're looking for. So that's great. And now, next, we're ready to move on to the next step. And the next step is going to be taking some of this information and outputting it on our web page. And then we're going to hook up the next API, which is going to be YouTube. So that's going to be really interesting. So that's all coming up. So now try this out for yourself. Open up your editor, create an input field, and then grab that value from the input field and pass it into your API, effectively making it dynamic. So if we do test, you can see that we get different results being returned back. So try it out, make sure it's working. Next lesson, we're going to continue to build out this application.